In today's RetroStyle Spotlight, we'll go through the emulator roundup, the Romhack report, as well as taking a look at a progress report on BennVenn's Game Boy Color screen mod, Tempest 4000 being unveiled to the world, and Retro Fighters Nintendo 64 controller redesign. I've been taking everyone's feedback in for RSS. The first 3 episodes are now officially live, and I don't know what to say. The support for me has been fantastic. Granted, I don't have the Launchbox channel to post these on anymore, so the view count is significantly lower, the like count significantly lower, the comment count is significantly lower compared to me being on the Launchbox channel, but your support has gone up. The amount of patrons that I have has gone up. The amount of donations that everyone has given me has gone up. The amount of love and support, and it's just... it's amazing. It really makes me feel proud to have continued RSS. So thank you all very much. I hope the show is going the way that you like it. I hope the changes and the updates that I have brought to it are to your liking. If they're not, tell me what you want me to change in the comments below. Normally, the first 2 episodes, I talked a little bit about it because it was a brand new show, but I just want to do a little bit of a check-in and say thank you and remind everyone to keep the feedback coming, share it with your friends, and I hope the show is up to your standards. With that said, let's get right to it. Hit it! I also had to do the snap with one hand today because I have to hold my mic stand up. Yeah, it's starting to fail. So, wow, I need a new mic stand. I tried to extend it all the way up and then it just falls on me. So, lovely. However, thank you to all my patrons who are helping make this show a reality. If you'd like to help me support Do This and many new shows, then check out the various ways that you can help in the links below. Being a solo creator on his own, every dollar matters. And like I do every week, a special thank you to my patrons Alex Dubois, Draconis, Karen Storms, and Twistar. Thank you all very much for your dedication and your support. In this week's emulator roundup, of course there are a ton of Git updates over at EmuCR, but I don't think I need to keep repeating myself each and every week with mostly the same updates. So this week I'm not going to do that. Just head on over to the link below if you're curious about seeing any of the updates for various different types of emulators. However, in a bigger piece of news, RetroArch has now reached a new version, 1.6.4, and the update is big. RetroArch's 1.6.4 release has seen updates like CHD-based games getting some major attention. 2 of the developers that contribute to this project have written a new CHD library for RA and has backported the results for Beetle Saturn and PC Engine Fast, meaning that if you have CHD games for those systems, RetroArch will now read those files. MAME 2003 has seen some updates so that Mortal Kombat, NBA Jam, and WWF WrestleMania have the proper sound going on. The new Windows 98, Windows 2000, and Windows ME versions of RA now also have 29 cores up and running, which is up from 0 last week when I reported the new pre-release version was made available. Certain cores will not be able to get backported to the older architecture because of code incompatibilities. This flavor of RetroArch is using Visual Studio 2005 and by default limits the cores to be written in a compatible language. The PS3 version of RA is now getting nightly builds for all you PS3 modders out there as well, so your version of RA will be more in line with everyone else from day to day. Citra, OpenLoRa, and Dolphin have all seen updates that now make them easier to be used within RetroArch. Before, settings needed to be changed for the cores to work, meaning they lost a part of their plug-and-play. The backend API has been updated to account for this as well, and now makes this switch automatically. There are a few more major and minor updates as well, like RA being available soon on the Amazon App Store, core input remappings getting an update, configuration changes, being able to delete cores from within RA, and a ton of core and general usability updates as well. If you want to read the full list of changes, of which there are many, then the link is in the description below as usual. In the Romhack report, we'll be taking a look at 2 translations and a Romhack this week. The first translation this week is for Megami Tensei Gaiden, The Last Bible Special. Megami Tensei games are very special in all JRPGs, this being a side game series that can be called the same, odd, quirky, and very JRPG. Not every Last Bible game has a translation, but most do, and at various stages of development. But it's finally nice to see this Game Gear game get its justice. The translation was done by Mr. Richards 999, SS Translations, and Tom. Just Tom. Oh, and no, not that Tom. I don't think. Not only has everything been translated, but some improvements to the game have been made as well, such as making the enemy counter rates more reasonable and incorporating faster churning in the dungeons, as it was very slow by default. The second translation this week is from Macross Skull Leader Complete for the PC 98. The patch was released by Nebulous Translation and is their first translation this year. That part wasn't exactly clear. It may be their first translation ever, but they did specify their first translation this year, so they may have other translations under their belt. I wasn't quite clear on that. This game is one of the best examples of a visual novel mixed with a strategy game, and it's based on a popular anime mecha series called Macross, known in the West as Robotech, with quite a few modifications. This game in particular covers the movie Do You Remember Love, but it also takes some stuff from the anime series. It also contains some plot elements and characters of its own. The team says they settled on translating the complete pack because it's a compilation of both the Skull Leader and love stories, and as such, it is the most complete version of the game with 2 lengthy campaigns. The Romhack for this week is actually for a much newer game, and most of you may know of it already. Mario Galaxy 2, and by extension 1, has seen some love in the modding and hacking scene within the last few years. Neo Mario Galaxy is based on Mario Galaxy 2 and is ready to be played on your hacked Wii or Wii U with your original Mario Galaxy 2 game disc. Patch gets loaded onto the SD card and patches on the fly through a launcher like Revolution. I assume you can patch the disk image if you've created a backup of your disk, or if you found the disk elsewhere for use with Dolphin or a hard drive solution for your Wii and Wii U. By the way, the instructions are written on the developer's website, and by extension, myself, we do suggest that you guys actually own the game that you're going to patch on your Wii or Wii U. And if you're going to patch the ISO of your game, then make sure that you backed up the game yourself. We unfortunately cannot condone piracy. However, the hack boasts 8 new galaxies, 22 new power stars, the return of the Ice Flower and Red Star, a custom and remixed soundtrack, and is available in English, German, Spanish, and French. If you'd like more Mario Galaxy 2 goodness, then check it out below along with the rest of these patches. There's actually only one of these patches on romhacking.net this week. The other 2 are on the developers' websites. So I've covered BennVenn and his Game Boy screen mod in the past, so I wanted to check in and give everyone a progress report on RSS version 2. As a refresher, he is taking the Game Boy Advanced AGS 101 and shoving that into the shell of a Game Boy Color, along with a special ribbon cable. Now obviously, some people are more nostalgic for certain eras of the Game Boy, so for some it may make sense to mod the Game Boy Color, but at a certain point I think it would be easier to fully kit out a Game Boy Advanced. Not to mention, you're not cannibalizing a Game Boy Advanced and an AGS 101 screen, which seems to be a popular avenue for modders and hackers nowadays. Cannibalizing hardware from one console to another console, effectively making an already inexpensive screen, the AGS 101, technically more sought after and more expensive. But that's a different conversation for a different day. That's also just my point of view. Clearly, BennVenn thinks differently, and that's totally fine, and that doesn't stop this mod from being badass. Either way, BennVenn says that with a little bit of work, the mod could be better designed and more efficient, but currently requires taking out the power LED to make it all fit, and is currently very costly. The mod would require around $150, not counting the Game Boy Color. So while the mod is technically done, it does seem like he's ready to move on. It is really cool that hardware mods are extending the life of our nostalgia one system at a time. So I haven't covered this new Atari console that has been making the rounds and may seem to be actually real. I do have thoughts on the project, but I think I'm going to make a separate video for that, as I think that burying it inside of an RSS video may not be a good idea. Besides the fact that I think it will be a flop, some other interesting news surrounding Atari is coming to light. In this instance, Atari and Jeff Minter, and I also apologize to Jeff if I'm mispronouncing your last name there, are working on Tempest 4000. Straight from the press release, quote, "Just as in the original game, players are once again in control of the Claw, a powerful spacecraft equipped to destroy deadly creatures and other obstructions with rapid-fire shots on vibrant geometric prisms. With 3 game modes to choose from and 100 levels to conquer, players must eliminate all enemies as quickly as possible to survive, aiming for the coveted spot at the top of the leaderboards. So I was never personally a Tempest 2K or 3K fan. As most of you know, my Atari gaming doesn't really go deep at all, but I think this is a pretty damn awesome venture for those that loved those games, and a ton of people did. There is also another reason why this is a shocker to a lot of people, and that's because Atari actually DMCA'd Jeff's previous game called TXK on the PlayStation Vita. Essentially, it was a spiritual successor to Tempest 2K and 3K. According to Atari at the time, quote, "There is nothing remotely original in TXK, and in no meaningful sense can TXK be described as Jeff Mittner's own independent creation." Jeff did have much to say on the subject as well at the time, tweeting that he, quote, "could never have imagined one day being savaged by Atari's undead corpse, and was, quote, beyond disgusted." This put the ports of this game on indefinite hold, so the game never matured to other platforms. You can still get this game on the Vita, but it never got outside of that ecosystem, so a lot of people actually didn't know about this game, and it flew under the radar for most. However, clearly the hatchet has been buried between Jeff and Atari, Jeff going so far as to say that games end up coming out on top in the end. There are also currently no other details, like if it's the new Atari console exclusive, or if this will be on other platforms, as well as pricing, or dates, screenshots, or videos for that matter, but many people are going to be excited by this news, if it's even half as good as TXK was, and carries on the nostalgia of Tempest 2K and 3K. So this might be a shocker, or not really a shocker if most of you have listened to me talk about any of my nostalgia previously, but I think the Nintendo 64 controller is extremely odd, but it works and is very comfortable, and one of the first controllers that I used at length for years as a kid. So imagine my shock when I saw this. Well, honestly, I think an extremely ugly looking controller. Don't send me any comments about this. Let me get through this story first before you send your hate my way, please. So I don't begrudge the idea of a replacement N64 pad, and this does look like an interesting idea for putting the N64 pad into a more modern fitting. Retro Fighters put up their Kickstarter and it made its goal within a day or two. So clearly I am wrong in that fact, and people are voting with their wallet. By making their goal, I mean they smashed it. I'm currently writing and recording this when they're 2 days into their Kickstarter, and they've already almost tripled, if not quadrupled, their goal. So I'm not sure if it's my nostalgia getting in the way or what. I suspect that it might be. Granted, these are also mock-up images, and the prototype is devoid of any major design or character, so neither should be accurate on the final product, which I am guilty of, basing this product on design images and prototypes. The basics of the controller, the C buttons along with the A and B buttons are there. Their spacing looks correct, and their placement seems to be spot on as well. That analog stick, while it looks much better than the default N64 controller, doesn't look all that great considering Xbox One and PS4 control sticks, and doesn't fill me with confidence. Not to mention, you can also mod an original N64 controller and put a GameCube stick inside of it as well. Granted, that kind of flies in the face of what I just said in one of my previous stories with BennVenn and cannibalizing parts from one system for another system. However, Nintendo is actually still making GameCube controllers to this day, whereas the Game Boy and Game Boy Color, Game Boy Advance stuff isn't being made even by third parties. So, slightly different circumstances in this case. Just want to throw that out there. The D-pad as well looks to be lacking that specific design that D-pads can finally use. Nintendo held the patent on the original D-pad that they used throughout the entire existence of all their consoles and handhelds, that very classic D-pad. There was a reason why no other consoles used it, and they held that patent up until a few years ago, and now that patent has expired, so theoretically, third parties and other controller makers can use that D-pad design. That's actually why the Xbox One controller uses that design. This pad's D-pad looks to be rounded and reminds me too much of a shit gummy D-pad. And again, granted, All of this is without using one of these controllers, so clearly I am going based on look and thoughts. The Z button, for design reasons, doesn't go onto the underside of the controller. Though as I write that, the Xbox One Pro controller does some extremely interesting things with paddles and recessed buttons on the backside of the controller, so it can be done in a modern design. The Z button, however, is smart to include on either side of the controller, versus the GameCube controller, which included the Z button only on the right side. Some games have a dedicated Z button function, others will swap that same function on the L and R, but in this case, having it on both sides will allow you to choose how you want to utilize it. Last but not least, this is solely for the N64, no USB functions in sight, for now. Granted, you can plug this into a USB converter box, but that can cause other issues like latency. On the Kickstarter page, they did express interest in doing a second version with USB if they're successful, and so far it seems like they might be. One of the reasons why this is key is because the design of the controller does need to be specific. I was going to say that I wanted the Z's to be ZL and ZR and have a few extra buttons in the center of the controller to cover other things like a select button, but it's not able to natively take advantage of USB, so therefore those concerns don't matter in the least. After all, this is designed solely for your Nintendo 64. After further review and even some criticism, I do believe that they are onto something here. I love the old Nintendo 64 design, but my go-to controllers are the PS4 and Xbox One pads nowadays. They just work really well. If they do decide to go for a USB design, I don't know how that will look, given there wouldn't be much room for a second stick. If they can somehow combine modern pads and the N64 pad even further, make all the buttons customizable, and potentially even add a second stick, add another center button, then for the color scheme, I might actually be all over this. My criticisms are still on my mind though, and third-party controllers can be extremely hit or miss. I would love to use this edition first though, and if it does wow me, then I would be much more optimistic for future revisions and new designs. 8-Bit Do proved it can be done, and there is something missing for me in the controller design department that Retro Fighters is nailing, but the rest of the unknowns are of bigger concern to me. Who knows, this controller might actually be my first piece of hardware review. I have been wanting to get more into reviews, something that I am workshopping currently, and this controller could be my gateway into hardware. Who knows? Let me know what you think of this controller in the comments below, and let me know if you're going to back it over at their Kickstarter page. The Kickstarter page will be going through till the end of the month, and they do offer several tiers with different perks and incentives. So that was Retro Style Spotlight episode 4. Most everything that you heard about in this episode can be found linked in the description below. Thank you to all my patrons over at my Patreon campaign. I cannot thank you all enough for all the support that you give me in helping keep RSS and new show ideas alive. Thumbs up the video if you liked it, thumbs it down if you didn't, leave me a comment on any of the stories that you heard in this edition of RSS, or tell me how you think the show is going, or if there's anything that you think that I can improve. Remember, Freaks and Geeks, to play more games, and I'll see you all next time. Have a good day.
Take a bite of that pineapple. Reflect and tell me how it tastes. It only